We are now going to welcome in the expert of experts for BYU athletics and discuss as many storylines as possible. Athletic Director Tom Holmoe joins us now on the Deseret First Credit Union hotline via Zoom. The greatest to ever wear number 46 at BYU. Tom, welcome back to the show.
I voted for Shea Muirbrook.
That's because you're a good man. You're a humble man. Today, obviously, was supposed to be media day. It was canceled due to the uncertainty of the upcoming football season and COVID-19 and everything that goes with it. Understandably, your job is crazy. It's chaos right now. So walk us through the typical day of the athletic director at BYU.
The typical day, actually, it's pretty routine, and that's one of the things that when this all went down in March and we saw the NCAA men's basketball tournament canceled, we got our leadership team together and we said we got to chart a course that's going to lead to when we come back. And I think that what we've done every day is try to have a little bit of a routine. Personally, I think, and individually, it's important to keep my focus and my health. There's a lot of things going on mentally and emotionally and physically, and people are losing it. But I feel really good about the way our teams hold together. And it looks like every day what we've tried to do is find out about best practices around the country. We're on Zoom calls most of the day. We're communicating with our internal people. And it seems like most days what we're trying to do is take a step forward, not just be in a quagmire or stupor, just stranded. We want to move forward. And it seems like most days we've been able to take a small step forward. But on some days, you take 3 steps back because of the news around you. And in recent weeks, just the uncertainty of all the things surrounding sports and our country for that matter, there's been a little bit of stall, a little bit of hesitation, a little bit of looking around, and a little bit of questioning where we go from here.
And let's walk through some of that. So biggest news over the weekend, a report came out regarding the potential of playing Alabama in week 1. Other teams like Texas A&M and Oklahoma State have been mentioned as well. What's the validity of these reports of these possible Power 5 replacement games?
Well, I know that the media has a lot of things on their hands. There's no games right now, so they're very active. So there's been a lot of communications, a lot of conversations with people. You got to look at it this way. It might take me a year and a half to put together a schedule normally. And when those 2 conferences, the Big Ten and the Pac-12, announced that they were going conference only and opened up games, you're talking about trying to get, it's not just me, but most of those athletic directors and coaches that had their games canceled had to all of a sudden start sprinting. So I've had a lot of conversations with a number of people. Some have been reported from their side. And I think that they'll continue today and tomorrow and until this goes to the point where we're playing football.
Tom, what role does ESPN play in the potential rescheduling of these games that are rumored right now?
ESPN is a partner of ours. We have a great relationship, but they're also a partner of many. They're also talking with the other broadcast companies about how this all fits together, particularly in the spring or particularly in the fall when you're looking at shortened schedules, perhaps, maybe reduced number of fans in the stands, if any. And they're trying to just make sure to see where we are. And I really appreciate, I got a great call on Saturday from one of my friends at ESPN that said, "How are you doing? You all right? We're with you. Just keep going." I asked a few questions about strategy. He did likewise. And we came out, it was a positive conversation, knowing that BYU can move forward with these various possibilities out of our hands right now.
I guess I would ask the same question, Tom. How are you doing? Because 5 games were taken off the schedule, all Power 5, Utah notably among them. How are you doing in this process of trying to replace those games?
It's rather wild and woolly. Like I said earlier, it might take 6 months to 18 months, maybe 2 years to really put together a game. And now it's been like 2 weeks and you're thinking that you have to get those games back on the schedule. But I think the hard thing is everybody is kind of in a standstill because they're waiting to see what's going to happen with the NFL, the NBA, and Major League Baseball, with these 3 Autonomy 5 conferences, the SEC, the ACC, and the Big 12. what are they going to do? Are they going to go to conference only also? And so it's such a moving picture. Every day is a new day, and you just got to stay with it. You got to keep your focus and keep your wits and be able to, at the end, when they say we're playing, have a schedule.
Tom Holmoe, BYU Athletic Director, with us on BYU Sports Nation. I'm about to ask you a question that you have been asked approximately 1,378 times over the past few years, and that is about Notre Dame, who has an opening in Week 13 because of their agreement with USC going away, with the Pac-12 going conference only. Is this the year that BYU sees Notre Dame?
Maybe. Notre Dame is an entity in its own. They are not part of a conference. They're independent in football, but they do have all their other sports are in the Atlantic Coast Conference. So they have a scheduling agreement with the ACC in football. And so right now, Notre Dame and the ACC are trying to work out how they might do their scheduling, considering the ACC could go all the way through their schedule, or perhaps a conference only, or maybe a conference plus kind of entity. So it just really is still in a wait and holding pattern to see what they want to do and how their schedule is going to play out. It's difficult for them too as an independent, but they do have a little bit to fall back on with the ACC in some of those games.
Are you hoping to replace the 5 Power 5 games with 5 more Power 5 games?
I think that would be nice, but it might not be realistic. I think that would be our first option, would be to look to see if that's possible. But the number of dates that are available and openings that match our open dates, and you have to understand that right now we have 5 openings. There could be more that were to come if some of these conferences make decisions like the earlier ones.
Yeah, and the SEC is one we're waiting on, right? Because that's the other Power 5 game left. Do you get a sense that the group of 5 may go that direction as well?
I think it's hard to tell because they're waiting too. They're waiting for sure to see how that goes, because if the other 3 autonomy conferences go conference only, then that will shell a lot of their games, and that might force them to go conference only also.
Athletic Director Tom Holmoe with us on BYU Sports Nation. I think everybody is crossing their fingers, hoping that a regular 12-game schedule can happen. But as you have alluded to earlier in this conversation, Tom, it's hard not to think that this might shrink to 9 or 10 games. So what type of possibility is there that a full college football schedule is going to happen this fall?
I would say that the full conference schedule probably wouldn't happen. It could, but you see right now where you have the Pac-12 and the Big Ten already saying they're not doing that. So their number of games are going to be reduced. I'm not an expert in the CFP, but it would be interesting to know how those conversations are going and whether those other 3 autonomy conferences, if they go for a full schedule, you're going to have an imbalance, and that would be something to consider. But we just have to wait to see what's going to happen with those conferences up above, the P5s, before the group of 5 will make a decision on that.
You've mentioned waiting, yet I'm sure you're proactive in scheduling or hoping to have different possibilities available depending on different situations. So how are you handling that in terms of, okay, if everyone goes conference only, what does that mean versus if we can still play some of these non-conference games for other teams, Power 5s or Group of 5s? What kind of possibilities are you playing with?
Well, it's definitely staging right now because you're not really sure. So you're having these conversations that you hope lead to a contract. But everybody has some hesitation because they don't know for sure exactly how it's going to go for them. But it is good to be able to narrow it down. If there's that many possibilities, if you can narrow it down and get some good feelings from other schools that this could possibly work between BYU and that school.
Is there anywhere in the realm of possibilities the idea of, like Notre Dame has with the ACC, BYU being in a scheduled partnership with some type of conference?
Anything's possible on the table. This is a pandemic. I mean, I've never had to deal with this before, nor has anybody in their active positions. So it's hard to say that, but when the time comes, at this point in time, I'm not really surprised by many things that come my way.
Recently, either a week ago or today, formal 6-week practice was supposed to start, getting ready to prepare for week one. Yet, if you don't have a week one game, that's delayed, right? So what kind of urgency do you have to get a week one game so that formal practice can begin?
Well, we're looking at waivers so that that doesn't have to happen, because it just keeps our teams up in the air and when you can bring student athletes in. We're very fortunate here at BYU that the state of Utah has been open for quite a while. We've had our football players and other student athletes in our facilities working out with the strength and conditioning coaches and the trainers under a very closely watched policy and procedure for health and well-being. So we're ahead of the game in that regard, but we still would like to have all the possible practice dates that we could with our coaches. On the other hand, there's a number of schools in the P5s even that they haven't really had that full time, and they're going to need it. This is one of the big issues that's going to determine how this goes, is whether or not the medical experts determine that our athletes, whether it's football or volleyball, cross country or soccer, are going to be able to have a very good season of health, and that we're not going to come in and be breaking down because they're not ready to play. I feel our kids will be ready to play if we can stay on the schedule.
When you look at your athletes and transitioning them back in amidst a pandemic and COVID-19, why do you feel like BYU is in a good position, not just with football, but with all of your teams, to handle this if and when you get the green light to play?
I think it's one of the great debatable topics in this all is whether or not these athletes or students that are coming back to school are going to be healthy with this pandemic. And one of the things that we decided early on, with the permission of our administration here and the Board of Trustees with the school, was that we felt that we could do a better job of keeping them healthy, their physical health, their mental health, their emotional health, if they were with us. They weren't working out when they weren't here, or they were working out in facilities perhaps that might not be as clean or as sterilized. So we put together a plan where we felt that we could bring them back and that they would be healthy. And it's been a really good experience for our athletes and for our administration. We've had great support from our central administration. President Worthen has put together a, quote, COVID team. We have one down here in athletics. They're communicating on a daily basis. It really is a day-to-day process where we make adjustments, we move forward strong, and I feel like our athletes have really enjoyed being back. They're friends, they're teammates, they love each other, they want to play, they're in their sport. It means so much to them, and they're able to do it in a safe environment. And so to push them out back to wherever they were coming from, some of them aren't in great situations where they can be healthy and they can work out. They live in cities or states that are not open. We have a really good environment, and that's why I feel so strongly that our kids are doing well.
Yeah, there's some schools that don't have anybody in right now, yet BYU is taking precautions, like you said, getting work in so that if and when we do have a season, they're ready to go. So a question along those lines. Obviously, a lot of governance and protocols are going to be conference-based. As an independent, when you play a team this fall, how do you think that's going to work? Are you going to have to just submit to the conference-regulated protocols when you play a team? And if you play an independent, you'll just negotiate it with that independent?
That's what we're imagining. We know that the Power 5 conferences, and that's one of the reasons that the Big Ten and the Pac-12 decided to do what they wanted to do, is play conference only, is for the standards and the protocols of testing. So we are sure and certain that when we play those P5 schools, that we'll have to play and live up to that, which we'd want to do. We'd want to play to the highest standards that we could. Now, if we're playing other conferences that may not be living up or playing up to those standards of the testing, it may be a different story. We would imagine that as we get closer and these games are locked in across the board, that we'd work out that protocol.
Regarding testing, the NCAA submitted a document saying they wanted testing, was it every other day or every day? It seems like some schools won't be able to afford that. How realistic is that? What are your thoughts on how often testing is realistic?
It's pretty stringent, the report that the guidelines, I don't even know if they're guidelines, I'd say standards that the NCAA put out for all of their teams. It is, a lot of people don't realize that NCAA football is CFP football. It's complicated, but NCAA sent out these standards for all their championships, and they don't run the football championships, at least at the FBS level. They do for the FCS level. So those levels are high, which they should be. And it may, and what you're seeing is some smaller conferences are saying we can't live up to those. We're going to have to delay until the spring. And that's where right now, in the next days and weeks to come, you're going to see more conferences make decisions on that. And we'll have to react to how those conferences' decisions go.
We're talking with BYU Athletic Director Tom Holmoe on BYU Sports Nation. Tom, you look at the campus standpoint now, and President Kevin Worthen and the BYU officials coming out and saying, we're going to go with an in-class and partially online scheduling system. So what your athletes are going through in terms of training for sports, how are they going to balance that with what they're going to be required to do in class? And what type of guidance and support have you received from the entire campus community led by President Worthen?
Well, it is uncharted waters. We haven't done this before. We looked to do that possibly in the spring, but that all fell apart when all the championships and all the seasons were canceled. But this is one thing that's been helpful, is the athletic department and our athletes coming back has given our school administrators a good little pilot or peek at how it could be. Now we're talking about way different numbers when you're talking 30,000 plus students and many, many more staff, faculty, and et cetera coming back. We're going to have to work through that. We'll still have to keep our policies and procedures as far as safety is concerned. But those are things that we're working out right now with our campus. How and where we will kind of cordon off our workout facilities and keep them separate from the rest of the campus community, which every parent, I think, that sends someone to BYU, one of their students or one of their children as a student, will have to consider, how's it going to be?
Two FCS leagues have already said they're going to go to the spring in Ivy League and Patriot. What are the possibilities, you think, of spring sports, everything moved from the fall?
It's what I'm hearing and what I'm reading is it's the last resort. And I think you're seeing with the SEC and the ACC and the Big 12, they want to play football. They're going to do everything they can to play a football season this year. And if they get to the point in the next couple of weeks, because it's only going to be a couple of weeks, and then that window is going to close. But if that window closes, then they're going to have to step to the next process, which will be, can we move this to the spring, and how will we do that? They're not working on that. We have taken a few opportunities to look and see how that would be, but it is very, very complicated. You can imagine playing all of our sports at the same time, during the same season. It would be difficult, but we would look to do it if that was the way we were told to go.
Yeah, complicated is clearly the word of the times, Tom, and there is the huge question floating out there of what type of participation can fans have in these games? LaVell Edwards Stadium seats roughly 63,000 people. You have a number of other venues that hold big crowds. What's the likelihood of fans attending any of these games if and when they do happen in the fall?
Right now, because of the state of Utah and their stance or status for the state, it's in a position where it's open right now. It's not green, it's in a yellow position. They have green, yellow, orange, red. And we've been through all the sequences except for red, thank goodness. But right now, we're planning contingencies for all of those. But right now, if we were to open and play tomorrow, we would probably be in a situation where it'd be a reduced number of fans. And we've worked through all the various scenarios of who, what groups, constituencies, and the percentages of each, and where they would sit in the stadium to be safe, with social distancing in mind, with everything in their health in mind, for the people in the stands as well as the people that are there serving them as staff.
The West Coast Conference moved fall sports back to September 24th. What was your reaction to that? And will BYU be aggressive in non-conference scheduling in soccer and volleyball, where it may be tough to get an early in the week game?
It was a tough decision for the WCC to make, but people have to understand, when you look at our West Coast Conference, we have 7 teams from our conference that are in California. And a number of those schools have not returned their student athletes to the facilities just to work out, not with their coaches, but just to be back working out. So there came a point in time where it became unrealistic that those 7 schools would be able to compete in a non-conference situation. And we did it as a group, as a conference, and set that starting date as the 24th of July, or September, September, so that we would be starting at the same time. I feel that it'll benefit us a little bit because I think our kids will be strong enough to play maybe multiple games in a week, where maybe the other teams from the WCC, they might not be able to match playing non-conference games during the week.
Tom, we're going to think positively here and say, when a green light is given, how will BYU be ready to go on day one based on what you have seen from the athletes preparing? And what's the buffer time you think they need to get ready for the season?
That's a good question. I'm super impressed by our student athletes. From the minute that the seasons were canceled last spring, to see how they adapted so quickly. Their attitudes were good. They started looking forward. We had a great academic year last year in that semester where they're taking online courses. And now you look at these fall student athletes and they're saying, ooh, we just witnessed what happened with our classmates in the spring, how they lost their season. So they're in anticipation that it could happen and that would be a possibility that they might not be able to play. But they're ready to go. And that's what our motto was. When this thing starts open, we're going to be ready to go. And all of our coaches have done a marvelous job of keeping our kids emotionally, physically, spiritually, and mentally sharp so that when we do have an opportunity, we can go. And I would say, if we start in any of these sports, our kids will be competitive and ready to go.
That would be a great way to end this interview, but I have a follow-up I've got to go back to. So regarding scheduling, we talked about all the different possibilities. We're waiting to see whether other Power Fives go conference only, whether Group of Fives go conference only. If that ends up being the case, is there a possibility of an independent-only type schedule?
Yes, that could occur, because being in an independent, if every one of the conferences went conference only and didn't leave to like a +1 or +2, then there wouldn't be any other games available. And we would work out some type of an arrangement with the other independent teams or any other schools that for some reason might have a game available. And that's just, that's one of the things that if a conference were to go 10 games only, you look at a conference like the Big 12, they have 10 teams, so they could only play 9 conference games unless they played one team twice. So there's still some information, some strategies, some decisions from them that have to be made before we can take those steps.
Tom, at some point in the future, when your life calms down, I want you to write a book on scheduling and how your life has been affected by it as the BYU athletic director.
Can I write the foreword, Tom?
I'm going to let you guys write that book, because I'm hoping, for posterity's sake, that nobody has to go through a pandemic. These student athletes and the coaches and the fans, it's rough. It's been rough on them. I just can't tell you how many people have called me, texted me, come up to me in the community and say, we want to play, we want to see these kids, we want to root for the Cougars, we need this. Now, it's possible that it might go on ice again, but I know how important it is, and that's why we're doing everything in our power to make it happen.
We got a daily show. We want games too, Tom. Let's go, baby.
You're doing great. You never know there are no games.
Hey, Tom, let's give you a heavy dose of the BYU Sports Nation karma
Thank
for
you.
the challenges that await you, and we appreciate you spending some extra time with us today and answering a lot of tough questions.
Thanks a million, guys. Good luck.
Thanks,
BYU
Tom.
Athletic Director Tom Holmoe with us on BYU Sports Nation.
Great information.